You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Sometimes we need to slow down and remember the simple pleasures in life. Good coffee, good books, and good company. Come on in. Take a seat. The coffee's just been brewed. Let's see who we have in the coffee shop today. What a beautiful day in the coffee shop. Now, today I'm looking for 2 people at a table, but only one book. Book. Where's the book? There's a longtime friend and a repeat guest, George Weinstein, and he's got his book, Hardscrabble Road. George, outstanding to see you back in the coffee shop. This is what, your 3rd visit?
It is. I'm an old regular now.
I'd have to agree with you. So, you've got to tell me a little bit about Hardscrabble Road.
It's Southern historical fiction and was inspired by stories that my father-in-law would tell, just making conversation at the dinner table and the supper table. It was a proper Southern household, so there was no lunch. But after a meal, he would just kick back and start telling stories from the old days down in South Georgia, Colquitt, Bainbridge, that area, and talking about growing up during the 1930s and 1940s as one of the poorest of the poor, sharecroppers, he and his brothers and older sister down there, and their insane, brutal father and neglectful mother, and all the adventures they had. Some blood-curdling, some hilarious, and always compelling. And from the first story I heard him tell, and that would have been even before I got married to his daughter, I was just captivated, and I started copying them down immediately. I always had it in the back of my head that, boy, these are really good. This could be turned into something. And throughout the 1990s, I amassed a huge album of these stories, and then around 2002 decided to turn it into a novel.
Sounds fantastic. Now, you brought a friend today. You brought Steve McConaughey, who is your publisher. How are you doing today, Steve?
I'm doing great. Really glad to be in the coffee shop.
Oh, I am more than happy to have you. Now, you are also an author, and you run SFK Press. You've got to tell me about SFK Press. How did it get its name, and what made you decide to start your own publishing company?
So SFK Press comes from the name of our company, which is Southern Fried Karma. And Southern Fried Karma there's a philosophical meaning to it. But for a practical standpoint, we're a multimedia company. We have SFK Press. We have a online literary magazine called The New Southern Fugitives, and we're also this summer branching out into films. We're making a documentary film and a short film. So Southern Fried Karma is the name of our company. So we just called our print imprint SFK Press.
Sounds fantastic. Now, how many books do you have out, and are they all through SFK Press?
I've only got one book out, but SFK Press, it's out through SFK. I was the guinea pig, so I could learn how to work the levers and turn the cranks and the handles in the publishing business.
Sounds fantastic. So, what made you want to start such a unique imprint? You're kind of a specialty imprint.
In 2012, I left the bulldozer business to go help my father, who had dementia. He's a type A personality, and I had to go help him run his real estate business. And I took that opportunity to go back to school and get my Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing at Queen's University in Charlotte. And I became involved in the literary world, the writing world, and the publisher world. And I saw a business opportunity with the way the publishing business is changing because of the digitation of books, how the technology has made it much more accessible to a wider variety of people. And then at the same time, there was an incident in August 2015 where Dylan Roof walked into a church in North Charleston, South Carolina, and murdered 9 people. and sadly, his face became the face of the South, and the South has once again had become known for violent hatred, and I didn't want that to stand. So I married a business opportunity with a calling, and that's how we started Southern Fried Karma, and that's how we came up with SFK Press.
Sounds like quite an adventure.
It was and it is, and so we became intent on finding writers and authors who really represent the genuine, authentic South, and I think George and George's stories do that, and so that's how we came. And I'd known George for a while through the Atlanta Writers Conference, and it was one of the easiest choices I've ever had to make in working with George.
Well, that's fantastic. So, George, what made you turn to a local regional publisher?
Well, a couple of issues. I actually had been published previously by another local press, and in 2016 they stopped paying me my royalties, and by 2017 also stopped returning my phone calls and emails. So I had to fire them. And firing your publisher and demanding all your rights back means that, great, you got your rights back so you can take them to somebody else, but your books cease to become available for purchase as new books. They'll forever be out there on Amazon as used books, but as new books that I can make money from, they cease to be. And so I was really intent on finding another publisher for my work. I knew Steve from working with him in my capacity as director of the Atlanta Writers Conference, which he had participated in a number of times. And we had a conversation about him starting just SFK Press, and I thought that would be a really exceptional opportunity to keep it local, which is something I really enjoy, having the ability to meet face to face and sit down with my publisher, and hated to give that up after I fired my first publisher. So it was a joy to be able to do that again, to have somebody local who is watching out for my interests, and we can talk strategy and actually look each other in the eye and shake each other's hand. So that was a really great opportunity I wanted to avail myself of, and that's how Steve and I linked up again, instead of through my conferences, now with him at the in the driver's seat, and me as one of his clients.
Now, your book you mentioned is based on stories told by your father-in-law. Were there other people's stories you gathered, or did you make some of them up? How did you fictionalize them?
Well, it is a novel, and so when I approached him in 2002 about turning his story into a novel, that was my first point with him, was this is fiction. I'm going to change names. I'm going to change events. I'm going to introduce new characters. I'm not writing your biography. I am not ghostwriting your memoir. But what I want from you are your sense memories. I have all these anecdotal stories about, this happened and that happened. And those are all great, but in order to actually create a story that would put a reader back into the 1930s during the worst time our country's ever experienced economically, and in a very rural setting that most Americans wouldn't recognize, I needed his sense memory. So the way things smelled, tasted, felt, all of that. And to do that, I really needed to interview him intently, and his first reaction was, well, who would care? And I finally convinced him that I could make people care if he basically gives me the time machine of his recollections and puts me back there. I thought I could put readers back there. Well, so I started interviewing him, and quite often when we would go to visit him and my mother-in-law, one of his brothers would happen by. They were constantly visiting too, his two older brothers. And I never let it be known to them I was writing a book about their childhood, because this was a really personal project, and telling somebody you're writing about their past makes a lot of people feel a little strange. And frankly, I had married into the family. I wasn't a blood relative. I wasn't kin. And in fact, even worse, I was a Yankee transplant. So to have a Yankee transplant who also happened to be Jewish in this very waspy household, saying I'm going to write your childhood story was just, I thought, a little too much for them to handle. So I just kind of did it on the sly. I would just ask lots and lots of questions about their childhood. Oh, tell me about this. And, my father-in-law has told me that story. Do you remember that? What happened? And just acted like the really inquisitive person who married into the family, who I was, but I also had this other purpose, which was gathering fodder for a novel. And then once I had those kind of things put together, I had to actually create kind of a narrative arc where a character starts in this one situation and has to go through a series of trials and tribulations and overcome a whole lot of stuff and reach an end point that would be satisfying to readers. And so to do that, I had to introduce new characters because this now had to work as a fictional story and hang together as a novel, not just as a series of recollections. So that became my challenge of how to do that. And it took me 2 years to figure that out and finish the novel.
Wow, what a journey. And you anticipated about 3 questions. You're getting to be too good at this, George.
You've trained me well.
Oh, thanks. Now, Steve, what was your feeling when George approached you and said, I've got these books, I've had to fire my publisher, will you help me get them back out there on the market?
Well, like I said earlier, it was one of the easiest decisions I made in business ever, and certainly as a publisher. Number one, I was working with a guy who is well respected in the Atlanta writing community, but he also tells great stories. I had found Hardscrabble Road. I had actually given the book, the previous version of the book, as a gift to my son in high school. So he loved it. I read it. I loved it. So George's stories resonated with me. So it was something that was a really simple thing to decide.
Outstanding. Now, George, do you have other books you're working on that have not yet been published?
Oh yeah, every author's got some manuscripts in boxes, some of which will honestly never see the light of day, I suspect. But I'm always working on a new novel. I've got a thriller that I've been working on for over a year, and even started another book on the side that's a little more Carl Hyacin humorous caper kind of novel that I've just begun to dabble with. So there's always a few books rattling around in my brain, and that I get to touch occasionally on a keyboard, and it's just the joy of stringing one word after another is kind of an obsession for me. So I've got current books, I've got past books that honestly I don't know that ever need to be out there, and then hopefully I've got some future books I'm waiting to discover.
Amazing. Now, you organized 2 writers' conferences that I have heard a lot of good things about. How do you find the time to organize 2 writers' conferences a year and write books and do all the other things you must be involved in with the Atlanta Writers?
Well, not sleeping buys you a lot of time. Seriously, when I turned 50 years old a few years ago, my wife presented me with just the best present a partner could have, and that was the gift of time. She said, I want you to retire from your job, which was a very stressful job for me that required a lot of myself, and I didn't feel like I was particularly well suited to do, which made it stressful. And she said, I want you to retire from that job and just write full-time, do your volunteer work with the Atlanta Writers Club full-time, just however you want to spend your time, but do things that you enjoy. Because as she pointed out, at the age of 50, she had reached that milestone 1 year before I did. She said, we are not middle-aged. How many 100-year-old people do you know? We are post-middle age. And so, we should not look back and say, gosh, I wish I hadn't spent so much time working at a job I hated, just merely in the pursuit of money. She said, the money will take care of itself. Don't worry about the money. Do something you love. So that was an incredible gift I got for my 50th birthday, and it afforded me the ability to really focus all my attention on my books and on the Atlanta Writers Club and our twice-yearly conferences, which I have decided is really my calling. As much as I like being an author, it's helping other authors that I find much more satisfying to do.
Steve, what do you look for in that Southern novel that you'd love to get your hands on? Is there a specific genre? Is there a specific theme you want to see? What is it that draws you to publish a novel?
Well, we're looking for stories that are in some way unique about the South. I can think of one that we've got coming out here this summer. It's called Amidst This Fading Light. It won our 2017 novel contest, and it's written by a writer from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Rebecca Davis, and it's got great writing, but it's a fascinating kind of a dark tale. It's based upon a murder that happened in 1919 on Christmas Day, where a man murdered his family on Christmas Day, and she shapes a story around that. It's about family, it's about community. So those are things that I like family. I like the mix of history, but it's authentic, genuine storytelling that maybe presents the world in a different light, maybe a little outside of what the reader is expecting, but it still entertains and thrills and does all the thing that good fiction does.
So your press publishes exclusively fiction, and you'll take on almost any genre?
We don't do a lot of we don't do any romance, haven't done any sci-fi, don't do fantasy. It's more upmarket literary type fiction, historical fiction. We do thrillers. We've got a thriller coming out here pretty soon. We got a political thriller coming out. We do some dark comedy. We do some Southern fiction. So contemporary fiction, historical fiction is really where we've kind of been sticking to. But it's any kind of story that's going to resonate with us. But we're really outside the genre stuff, the romance and things like that.
Okay. That's always an interesting thing to know. Now, what advice would you give, Steve, to an author who wants to submit?
Don't be afraid. That's the first thing I see is that there's a reluctance to fail, and we are going to be the most friendly audience you'll ever have. So just send us your work, but send it to us when it's polished, when you've finished it, when you've done some work on editing, and it's as crisp and as clean as you can make it. That's when you send it. And that's a whole conversation about getting it there, but the first one is taking action, and it really kind of dovetails into what the beautiful gift that George was talking about that his wife gave him. Sometimes you just got to go ahead and just not be afraid and take the step. And so we're running a novel contest right now. It's the second one we've run, and we don't charge a reading fee. There's no entry fee. It just send us your novel and let us take a look at it. And I do that to encourage people to take that step, to go ahead and if you got a story in you, like George was telling with his father-in-law, that wants to come out, you go for it, man. That's really what at the end of the day I would say.
Great. George, your book, Hardscrabble Road, it focuses on the South. Has that been where most of it, the region of the country where most of its readers have come from? Or have you found people in all parts of the country just really enjoy your book?
Well, surprisingly, it hasn't just been in this country. I've done book club talks with folks in Canada. I think my favorite unexpected email came from a woman in India, and God only knows how she found this book, but she bought it, and she wrote to me and said, I'm in tears writing to you because during the hog killing scene in the book, which I'm sure some listeners are wincing at, but in a classic Southern hog killing, you use everything but the oink. You find a use for the blood, the brains, everything. And one of the real delicacies in the country is brains and eggs scrambled together. And so this woman was writing me from her city in India, saying that when she grew up, she lived with her grandmother, and her grandmother every Sunday scrambled brains and eggs for her breakfast. And she had not thought about that in 60 years. And suddenly reading that scene brought all those wonderful memories back to her. And she had forgotten just how much she cherished that time with her grandmother. Well, of course, I had no idea that I would be reaching somebody halfway across the world when I was, describing those scenes. I was describing those scenes because there were plot points I needed to drive, and at the same time, I wanted to provide authentic settings and activities for the characters in my story. Come a frost, that's what you do out in the country. Is you do the hog killing, and that meat is gonna keep you alive until the next year's frost, basically. So I had another purpose in mind utterly when I was writing that scene, but I made a woman cry, and halfway around the world in India, and cry with joy because it brought back memories for her. So it's just amazing how activities that you can describe in a book will reach an audience that you cannot conceive of, and it's because of so many shared experiences in this world. We're constantly saying, oh well, we have first world problems, and they're over there having third world problems or second world problems or whatever. But there's such a commonality of experiences that you can describe something that will touch somebody's life that you cannot even envision. And I think that's one of the real joys and gifts of writing is you just have no idea who you're going to influence.
I can actually believe that. And I'm going to take just a moment and talk about the show. I was shocked when I logged on to look at the statistics recently and found more than 17 countries listed on the location statistics, the geolocation statistics. And that just absolutely blew my mind. So, I mean, when I see people logging in to listen to my show, this little show from far-flung places as far as Korea, Japan, China, Germany, the UK, New Zealand, it really surprises me. It really does. So I totally understand your feelings there, George. Now, Steve, do you think you're going to have more authors for me that will be able to come visit the coffee shop in the near future?
I definitely will have more authors be able to come visit you in the coffee shop. We've got 5 more titles coming out this year, or 6 actually, and 2 of those are Atlanta-based writers, and 2 of them live in South Carolina. One of them lives in North Carolina. Rebecca Davis, who I already mentioned, they've got some fantastic novels coming out that I think would your listeners would find very engaging and interesting.
Outstanding. And as George is a testimony to, don't worry if they publish again next year. I love repeat guests in the coffee shop. George, I was looking at that cover you sent me. How did you come up with such an intriguing cover? It makes me want to just dive right in. It really does. And it draws me in with the pictures and the imagery.
The photograph on the cover of Hardscrabble Road is just iconic and was entirely accidental. It's the only photo that exists of my father-in-law and his 2 older brothers as children. It was taken in 1937 on the banks of Spring Creek. And there was one uncle who had a little bit of money and happened to snap that photograph of my father-in-law and his two brothers as they were commencing to start fishing. So my father-in-law is the one holding out the can of worms to his middle brother, and then the oldest brother is on the far right in that picture. I did a book club talk on the coast of South Carolina, and there was a woman in the audience who was so taken with that cover that she asked my permission, which she didn't need, but she asked my permission to paint that cover, to basically colorize it and do a watercolor of that image. And then she mailed it to me, mailed me a print of the painting she did, and that hangs in my kitchen, so I get to see it every day. So it's a photograph that really touches people. I can't tell you the number of people who've asked where I've purchased that picture. I said, "Oh, no, I didn't buy it. It's a once in a lifetime gift from my father-in-law." And so I mentioned before that story about me approaching him about writing this book and using his memories, and his response was, "Well, who would care?" Well, he got so engrossed in the sharing of his memories as I interviewed him that, one, he gave me that photo. He says, if it ever turns into a book, you might need something for the cover. And here's this one picture that exists of me and my brothers as little kids. And then the second thing was he started writing his own memoir. Where he started putting down a lot of those same stories he told me, putting them in writing for his daughter, my wife, the woman I married, and his two sons. And so he got so excited about that process of remembering in great detail that he ended up leaving a legacy for all three of his kids.
Fantastic. It just goes to show you never know who you're going to inspire to do what, even as an author. Now, Steve, you started Southern Karma Press to change the face of the South. Do you feel you've started to accomplish that goal, or where do you feel you are along that road to changing the face of the South?
We've taken the first step. It's a long journey, but it's with the old adage, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. So we've begun the journey, and it's something that it's the mission that pulls us forward. And I found that in life, if you've got to have the focus on the now, and that's what we do. But you also got to have something that's pulling you forward. And so that's how it works for us. It gives us something to keep on the horizon, and with everything all the different, not with just SFK Press, but with the New Southern Fugitives, with the films that we're going to be making, we're always trying to really portray the authentic South, and so we've started, but we got a long way to go.
Well, it's nice to know that you're not content to leave the South with an image of violence and hatred. George, you always seem to be involved with writing some way, somehow, be it the Atlanta Writers Club, be it you at your keyboard, be it talking about books, encouraging other authors. What is the one thing you wish you could accomplish in your writing career that you have yet to do?
Let's see, if we're talking about my writing career, so me, selfish me, the author, I would love for Hardscrabble Road, or another book that Steve does through Southern Fried Karma Press. I would love for one of these books to reach a broader audience, because at most, Hardscrabble Road with the previous press sold 8,500 copies, fewer than 9,000 copies, anyways. And to a best-selling author, that's like the first week of revenue for a book. That's not the the total earnings for a book, the total sales for a book. So I would be curious to know what the reaction is to my work with a much larger audience. And yes, that would mean me actually making a little bit of money on the book. That would be a nice thing to do. But mostly, I'm just curious about how a broader audience would respond to this. It seems to be incredibly popular with those who have read it, and it's a tough read. So if there are readers listening to this who are thinking, oh, I might like to buy that book, and Steve, cover your ears, but it's not an easy read because it's dealing with these kids living in horrible poverty, just grinding realistic poverty during the worst time our country has ever gone through. But they're cursed with these two awful parents, this psychopathic bootlegger of a father who is physically abusive and a completely neglectful, emotionally unavailable mother who doesn't have a whole lot of interest in raising her children. And so they pretty much have to raise themselves. And it's a hard, long struggle. The title, Hardscrabble Road, is a name of the road that runs past the farm where they sharecrop. But it's also a metaphor for their journey through childhood, and it is indeed a very hardscrabble road. And yet, those who have read it seem to really love this book. I get countless emails from people saying they read it once a year, or they've read it 5 times, they've given it as gifts, a dozen times or whatever. And that's all great, but I would really be curious about how it's received by a much wider audience to see if there really is something here that's resonating with the general public, or whether I just happen to have found a unique little fan base, and that's about as far as the popularity of the book would go. So that's my secret desire, that just more people would discover this.
One last question before we pay those radio station bills, George. What does Hardscrabble mean?
Well, it's an adjective that can describe something that is rough-hewn and gritty and difficult to traverse, and it's also it was a slang term for before there was macadam or asphalt. It was a slang term for the crushed stone and grit that was used to pave roads back, decades ago, a century ago. They would lay down what they called hardscrabble, which is why in nearly every community you will find a hardscrabble road. That's another one of the surprises about this book, is that I've gotten emails from New York State where somebody says, I live just down the street from a road called Hardscrabble Road. And I bought the book thinking that it was about my area of the world, but I enjoyed reading about South Georgia all the same. People in Tennessee, people in Vermont, people out west, they have all had experiences in or around a hardscrabble road. And so that's where the name comes to. And I think it also describes just what a difficult journey so many of us have had through life. I got to assume hardscrabble was the name given to roads not just because of the surface laid down there, but also almost in testament to the perseverance of individuals down a very bleak path that many of us face in life. So that's my philosophical response.
Fantastic. Now, I'm going to pour each of you a cup of coffee, and we are going to pay those radio station bills, and hang on with us because we've got more coming on the other side.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk, or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-553-8687. That's 800-553-8687. Again, 800-553-8687.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your sites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
Thank y'all for hanging in there with us while we paid those radio station bills. Yes, I am going to pour myself a cup of coffee. All right, Steve, I've got to ask, what is your favorite coffee shop treat?
My favorite coffee shop treat would have to be, I'm looking in the window and trying to decide, but I got to go for something that's kind of a southern tradition, being it's springtime. I always think about this city in the springtime. It's a beignet. I love a beignet, with the powdered sugar in New Orleans. So that would be my favorite coffee shop treat, a beignet to go with my coffee.
Oh, delicious. George?
That was a good choice. Damn. Chocolate chip scone for me.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. I love having a bunch of diversity around here. Never know what's going to come out. And sometimes I'm not even sure of all the treats in the coffee shop around here. Steve, you said you've got 5 new releases coming out this year?
Yes.
How much time and effort goes into each new release?
That's like asking how much time and effort goes into each one of your children, because each one of those books is you're raising it up. But we try, because we're running a book factory, to run on a schedule, and because we're a startup book factory, we've tried to expedite the schedule a little bit. But it's about a year from when we sign the author to when the book comes out, and it may be 13 months, 14 months, even though I would try not to do it in 13 months, but It's a year process, and we try and move it along with going on multiple tracks at once between the editing, the production, and the all favorite marketing. So it's about a year.
Steve, do you suggest that authors hire an independent editor to go over their work before they submit to a publisher, or do you have an in-house editor that can help them, or both?
It's funny you would ask that. I just happened to be at the Atlanta Writers Conference this past weekend, attending an panel of editors, because I'm fascinated by the industry, and they asked that very same question, and the answer was the one that you gave. Yes, and both. It doesn't hurt if you've got somebody that you know and you can trust. They can do it. Not your, if your cousin Myrtle doesn't know anything about reading or writing, I wouldn't say hire your cousin Myrtle, but it doesn't hurt. But we certainly have 2 editors on staff, and we work with 3 freelance editors. So our books go through at least a 4-stage edit process, and each stage may have a few iterations within each. But bringing a manuscript to a publisher as clean as what you think is perfect from your viewpoint is always a good thing.
And George, I know from previous experience, you would probably second that opinion.
Absolutely. You never want to give a publisher the opportunity to say no by carelessly submitting something that's not ready. And just figure, they'll clean this up. They'll make this better. I just want to get it out there, and then let somebody else be responsible for actually making it ready to read. And that's a huge mistake that lots of first-time writers make. Just that assumption that there'll be somebody who's going to wave a magic wand on the back end and make something better. Ain't going to happen. Usually what'll happen is you'll just get a big fat no. What's kind of interesting about using a freelance editor, though, piggybacking on what Steve was talking about at the Atlanta Writers Conference, it's great to use an editor to clean it up, but if the publisher then comes back to you, the author, and says, okay, this is good, but it's not ready to go. I want you to delve more deeply into your main character's psyche. I want more interior monologue. I want more interiority about that character so the reader will get to know them better. And I want this character changed out and turned into this other character. And I want to blend these 2 plot lines, and on and on and on. You get these pages and pages of red line notes that you are to implement if you want to be published by this press. You can't just turn around and toss that back to your freelance editor that you had hired on the front end and said, hey, they want these changes, help me make this better. You got to have the chops. You got to be able to do the work yourself, which means ultimately, although it's great to get that second pair of eyes from a freelance editor, ultimately you've got to be able to do all the work yourself, I think, in order to be successful at this game. And Steve, you might want to contradict me here. I don't know your opinion about this, but in my experience, you better be able to do it all yourself. You can't lean on anybody else.
Yeah. We expect our writers to be able to make the revisions. The first round of edits we're going to give our authors is going to be what we call a developmental edit, or we give them a line of notes. In fact, we just sent one out to an author today who's got a book called Not All Migrate. It's coming out in 2019, and we just sent their agent and them a list of, in your next revision, we want these 8 or 10 areas addressed. And that's a pretty high level edit. That's where the writer is going in there and making the changes, that we've suggested. So I'm not going to contradict you, George. I would never contradict you on air. Maybe off air, but not on air.
Now, Steve, you have probably reviewed a number of manuscripts since you started SFK Press. What is the one thing that will make you turn a manuscript down?
Here's the one thing. If the writing is at a level where it doesn't flow properly because of syntax, because of structure, that's the first thing that we're going to look at. Because writing is two things. There's the imagination. Can I come up with an interesting premise, which is not as easy as it sounds. But then there's the actual craft, the technique of the writing, and they've both got to be there. And a lot of stories will have a great premise, but the writer hasn't worked on their craft enough. They haven't spent enough time at the keyboard, trying draft after draft, in the workshop, with other writers. They haven't read enough of other stuff. Their writing's not developed enough, and we see that a lot. And our novel contest ends on May 31st. So I'll spend all of June. We'll be going through 100 plus manuscripts. So I'll really be able to give you a better answer by about June 30th. But that's what we look at. If the first page doesn't show that the writing's developed and it pulls us in, there's cliches and there's the little ticks that new writers have, then we're liable not to make it very far.
That's a really key point that your listeners who are writers should note. If the publisher sees a problem on page 1, that problem is going to probably ripple throughout the rest of the book or be endemic to the writing. That, oh boy, the syntax or sentence structures are all wrong. They're making really basic mistakes. Those tend not to be one-offs where, okay, I better keep reading because maybe that was just an oversight, a typo. You generally see those kind of mistakes just everywhere in a manuscript. So I had a question for Steve based on those reviews. Steve, do you read the entire manuscript for all of those manuscripts you receive, or do you stop when you hit a point where you go, no, this is not a contender?
We stop when I see it's not. What we'll do is we have a weekly meeting, and we kind of do it like American Idol, or The Voice, and where we start, we'll just throw a number 100, and then we go down to 50 or 25, and then we keep cutting the pile until we have our 6 finalists that we send to a judge. And this year, our judge is a gentleman named Pinckney Benedict, who is a writing professor at Southern Illinois University in Southern Illinois, in Bloomington, somewhere in Southern Illinois. Carbondale, that's where it is. And so we'll give 6, but 6 of the finalists to Pinckney, and he'll make his decision. But yeah, if I can't make it through the first, I try and give it 10 pages. Everybody gets 10 pages to see if I want to keep reading.
But I'll bet within 2 pages where this one just isn't going to hack it.
Yes, there's very few exceptions. There's one I can think of that was the exception because it was just a fantastic premise, and we kept reading further and further, and the writing just needs a lot more work. And we kept from the 2017 contest, we kept a group of what we called keepers. We didn't offer them contracts. We offered 5 authors contracts last year. But we had another group of maybe 6 or 8 keepers where we sent them some development notes about their manuscripts and say, stay in touch, because we like things about your story and about your writing, but it's not ready for us yet. So yeah.
Outstanding question there, George. I know who to call if I ever need a guest host. George, what made you decide to focus on your father-in-law's stories, and how did his brothers, who didn't know you were doing the book, take it when that very intimate family picture showed up on a book cover?
Oh, well, thank God. They never did find out. Both of them are deceased and went to their graves without ever knowing that I had milked their childhoods for fun and profit. Really, it was a secret project that was known only to my father-in-law, obviously my mother-in-law, since she was around the house all the time when I was doing these interviews, my wife, but not even my wife's two older brothers knew about me writing the book. And in fact, I was really afraid of what their reaction would be, my brothers-in-law, what their reaction would be when they found out that the book had come out, because one of them, at least, is a voracious reader. And I thought, well, it's just a matter of time before he discovers it. And to my knowledge, he still hasn't yet, which might speak to how poorly circulated this book has been so far. So maybe Steve can help me rectify that and get it on this one brother-in-law's radar screen. I suspect neither brother would be terribly happy knowing that. Again, I used the family lore as fodder for my novel, but I think I will always forever be the Yankee, who married into the family and somehow seduced their kid sister. So I've since the first publication of that book in 2012, I've kind of dreaded the phone ringing and one of them calling and saying, "You SOB, what do you think you're doing? Writing our daddy story." Hasn't happened yet, though.
Steve, George mentions that he'd like to get his book into more hands and more places and more exposure. What marketing plans are you working on to help your authors increase their visibility?
We work on a variety of different channels, sales channels. With George's book specifically, because it's a Southern story, South Georgia story. I've been down to visit the Bookshelf which is an independent bookstore in Thomasville, Georgia. I've been to a Novel Experience, which is a bookstore in Zebulon, the big city of Zebulon, Georgia. So We're a member of the Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance. That's one of our main focuses on getting the story out. We're creating a press release that as soon as I find out where George's brother-in-law, the town he lives in, the local newspaper will receive.
It's Athens, Alabama.
Oh, okay. And I happen to know Athens is up near Florence, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And that's where my father-in-law lived, was Florence.
Yeah. So we'll send out press releases. We're active on we've done some social media stuff, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, promoting the book. We go to the major book festivals throughout the South. So far this year, I've been to the Word of South Literature and Music Festival, which is in Tallahassee. I went to the Alabama Book Festival, which is in old Alabama town in Montgomery. I was at the AWP show in Tampa. We'll go there again, and we got 3 or 4 shows lined up for the fall. So we'll be out. I sold bulldozers for 25 years, and I found out that selling a $150,000 bulldozer is easier than selling a $16 book because it's getting the book recognized. But the key to sales is believing in the story and believing in what you've got. And so when I meet people at book festivals, and I can hold up George's book and I can point to the photograph and I can tell them where the story came from. It's either easier than selling a Komatsu excavator or a D6.
That's great. That's a very interesting analogy. I have to say, I don't think I've had any bulldozer analogies on the show.
Happy to be the first.
All right. Steve, is there anything you wanted to bring up that I haven't mentioned yet?
Have we talked about we talked about the novel contest? I do want to talk about something that's a little bit, it's part of the Southern Fried Karma family. It's our literary magazine, online literary magazine called The New Southern Fugitives.
You mentioned it, but sure, tell us a little bit more about it.
It comes out once a week, and it has three different pieces to it. It has a creative piece where we're looking for poetry, flash fiction, a short story. It has a non-fiction part. We're looking for essays, book reviews, and then it has a visual part. And it's really one of our main outreaches to find new writers. And what makes it different from a lot of literary magazines is, number one, we don't charge a reading fee. There's nothing to send us. Goodness gracious, I couldn't think making money off reading somebody's poetry, even if I wasn't going to publish it. And then if we do publish your stories or your poem or your picture, we pay you. And for a lot of new writers, getting that first piece published, whether it's a short story or an essay or something, really means a lot, and it helps them to build up their portfolio. But so that's the New Southern Fugitives, and we got the name. There was a group of poets and scholars in the 1920s in the west end of Nashville, centered around Vanderbilt University. The most famous one would be Robert Penn Warren, who wrote All the King's Men, and they had a literary magazine called The Fugitives. They were agrarian, anti-Southern industrialization, didn't believe in the myth of the lost cause. So we thought that we would resurrect the spirit of the Fugitives, and so that's where we came up with the name, the New Southern Fugitives. So we're really proud of that, and it comes out every Wednesday, and you can go to newsouthernfugitives.com to find that.
Now, how would an author or a writer who wants to become a published author go about submitting to the New Southern Fugitive?
So if you have short work, you go to the New Southern Fugitives, and there's a submission portal that is really cool. It's the easiest thing in the world. You just upload your files through there, and then if you've written some longer pieces, if you've written like a novel, you can either submit it to our novel contest, 2018 novel contest. The winner of that gets a $1,500 advance towards a publishing contract with SFK Press. So you just go to sfkpress.com and you can submit that. And then after the contest will be open for general submissions, starting when I get back from my vacation at the lake down this summer.
So are you going to take those manuscripts with you to the lake to work on them?
Well, getting down to the last cut, that last finalist, they get a little dog-eared. Yeah, they go with me, and I actually go to the beach, not the lake, because I just don't like the feel of the lake on my toes, but I like the beach. And so, yeah, they'll travel with me. They'll be my travel buddy. Yeah.
Fantastic. George, I got to ask, what was your first publishing credit?
Let's see. Very first national publishing credit was in an anthology called A Cup of Comfort for Writers, which is a competitor of Chicken Soup for the Soul, that series. So there was A Cup of Comfort, which seems appropriate for the coffee shop. It was a submission called 23 and a Half Love Letters, and it was based on how I wooed my wife-to-be writing old-fashioned love letters. This was in the 1990s, 1991 to be specific, before there were cell phones, even before there was really email in widespread use. So I seduced her, if you will, writing old-fashioned love letters, and really learned how to be a writer by writing those love letters, because every word had to count. I couldn't just say, "Wow, this is good enough," and fire it off. My heart was on the line, so I had to make every word count, and it really taught me about the importance of cadence, in your sentence structure, and varying things, and tone, and all of those little inside baseball kind of subtle things that distinguish writing. And it took me 23 of them before she said yes, and I was working on number 24, and that's how we got to the 23 and a half love letters. So if my proposal didn't go over well, I was working on contingency letter number 24, but thank God it did.
That's a fantastic little slice of life. All right, Steve, last question for you. Would you please give out your social media contact information? Yes, that includes SFK Press and the new Your Literary Magazine, which the title escapes me.
The New Southern Fugitives. So we're active. In fact, one of our staff writers for the New Southern Fugitives is responsible for our social media, Emery Duffy, and you can find us. We have a Facebook page under Southern Fried Karma. We have a Twitter at SFK_multimedia, but we're there as Southern Fried Karma. And then we're on Instagram under Southern Fried Karma as well. So we're on all three of those. Just if you look for Southern Fried Karma on any of those platforms, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, you'll be able to find us.
All right, George.
My website is simply my name, George Weinstein. That's GeorgeWeinstein.com. And I'm on Facebook. It's the George Weinstein 5 on Facebook. And I've got a Twitter account, but honestly, I don't use it, which is probably stupid because lots of book people hang out on Twitter. It's just not a medium that works for me.
And would you care to give out the Atlanta Writers Club contact information?
Oh, absolutely. So people who are interested in the Atlanta Writers Club, which has monthly meetings and free workshops and critique groups all over the metro Atlanta area, and in addition to sponsoring the Atlanta Writers Conference, you can go to atlantawritersclub.org, and if you're interested in the Atlanta Writers Conference, that's atlantawritersconference.com.
Well, I thank you both very much for joining me today in the coffee shop.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thanks, Jesse.
Oh, you're both very welcome. For those of you trying to track me down, you can find me on Twitter at Radio Host Jesse, and you can email me either at the station at jesse@klrnradio.com or a brand new email address for all of you out there, and that's jesse@jessescoffeeshop.com. Both will reach me. Now we have reached my favorite part of the show. I get to pour myself a fresh cup of coffee and snatch up Hardscrabble Road off the table, and I will see you next time in the coffee shop.